How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, this is going to be a very long, detailed video. And just recently, I did a video about Pete Buttigieg. And the things that I was talking about that are taboo in America. And since the gay community, they are a protective class, and they do live in America, well, naturally, there are going to be gay people that throw their hat in the political arena, which is very vicious and very nasty. And you are going to be judged. Now, as far as I can see, there are some people that have taken time to expose Pete Buttigieg, but for the most part, it's still taboo. So what I'm showing y'all here is quite fitting. It's not homophobic. It's you, Mayor Pete. And eventually, that's going to be thrown out. Oh, these people, they just like him because he's gay. No. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. But I said, I'm going to follow him real close because I know what's going on spiritually with this. We are in the age of exposure. And eventually, all these different type of communities that act in a nefarious fashion need to be exposed. So you can't hide behind being a woman. You can't hide behind being a senior citizen. You can't hide behind being handicapped. You can't hide behind shit. When you're greasy, you're greasy. Let's keep it core. But see, human nature will do that. Now, this is something that they have been throwing up in our face as long as I can remember. So I would imagine someone gonna be offended by what I present. But take the time to really listen to what comes out of my mouth. I'm not judging him for being gay. I cannot convey to you, like I said before, I got gay people in my family. I don't agree with them at all, and they know it, but I love them. I don't want nobody to harm them. Okay? And I would imagine they may have some opinions about me. You know, family do that. But it is what it is, and we got other kind of things in our family. But when you are on the world stage, you are going to be judged. Because they put it in our face often. They say we always pull the race card. Yeah, we do. Because of what y'all continue to do to us in America. So, since this is going to be quite lengthy, I will just only read what I'm going to present. And I will leave articles for y'all to get deeper into it. Because I have read some, not all. I'm going to keep it core because it was quite extensive. But doing my research, I was able to pull what I need to pull to give enough body of work about who is this mystery dude, Pete Buttigieg. Well, we do know he has a issue in the black community in Indiana, and that could work in his favor because folks will say, well, black people always bitch. They always pulling the race card. But your record speaks for itself, Pete Buttigieg.
Has ever gone straight from a mayor's office to the White House.
I am a proud son of South Bend, Indiana, and I am running for president of the United States.
Pete Buttigieg thinks he can be the first to do it. South Bend is a medium-sized city, but it feels like a small town. And many here are quick to praise the man they call Mayor Pete.
Since Mayor Pete took over, it's a beautiful town again, and every day it gets better and better.
It's kind of just, I think, his whole mentality on things, is just being a good person.
Buttigieg was just 29 when he was elected to lead South Bend.
Maybe I'll get to do something else in the future, but only if I turn out to be really good at being mayor of South Bend.
It was a former industrial center, grappling with a changing economy and a shrinking population. Under his leadership, new buildings went up, parks were renovated,
3, 2, 1.
and the downtown was revitalized. In 2014, he took a leave of absence to serve for 7 months in Afghanistan. Upon his return, Buttigieg came out as a gay man. In 2015, he was re-elected mayor with 80% of the vote.
To be given the opportunity to lead your own hometown, it is personal.
Over his 2 terms, Buttigieg worked with Republicans to get things done, says Councilman Jake Teshka.
One of the things that I think Republicans, and as a Republican, I can speak to this, is that Pete has a way of talking to people without contempt.
And it would help to nominate somebody with coattails who comes from the middle of the country and can speak to these concerns in plain English in the course of a presidential campaign.
I've been telling folks, don't discount him. I think that Pete's somebody that a lot of moderates, a lot of center-right people can look at and say, yeah, I can vote for that guy.
Buttigieg has shown his talent for languages on the campaign trail.
Estamos juntos. La cathédrale de Notre-Dame, c'était comme un cadeau à l'espèce humaine. أهلا وسهلا أنا بيت بوتيجيج رئيس مدني في مدينة South Bend, Indiana.
And in South Bend, Buttigieg answered the call one night when a young boy was rushed to the hospital and his mother needed an Arabic interpreter.
I don't think a lot of people recognized who he was. I certainly didn't.
6 years later, Dr. Donald Zimmer remembers it well.
He translated words that I said and words that the patient's mother said without imposing himself into the dialogue at all. I think that's the epitome of what public service is all about.
But Buttigieg's tenure as mayor began with a controversy. Soon after taking office, he demoted the city's first black police chief for recording department phone lines, and he refused to release the tapes, which were alleged to include racist conversations among high-ranking officers.
We know what's on the tapes, but there's somebody that think we don't know what's on the tapes, so they don't want us to hear what's on the tapes. But we all know what's on the tapes. They're condescending things about folk.
Reverend Sylvester Williams says the incident fueled mistrust in the black community.
If he wants to show good faith, he would do what he can do to make sure that the citizens hear the tape before he leaves. That would be a tremendous gesture for this community.
When the mayor announced his presidential run, City Councilman Oliver Davis says African American leaders were urged to keep their doubts to themselves.
We are very proud to have a person from South Bend to run for the president. That's exciting. At the same time, those of us who shared those kind of criticisms we were pretty much shunned. Like, be quiet. You don't talk about your dirty laundry when we have guests in town. We have the media and who national media is here, everybody else is here, be quiet.
But in June, after a white officer, Ryan O'Neill, shot and killed a black resident, 54-year-old Eric Logan, long simmering tensions gave way to public anger.
Of course, Black Lives Matter.
What about a black life? What matters about a black life to you, Mayor Pete? What matters about a black life to you? Answer that for in just months.
Buttigieg skipped a community vigil, and Logan's family faulted him for a lack of compassion.
The shooting added validity to, with all due respect to the Logan family, it added validity to those who had already shared these kind of thoughts before, who were pretty much hush-hush.
His struggle to connect with the black community in South Bend has carried over to his campaign.
I remember he explicitly said to the crowd, in order to win this, or in order to have a serious shot at this, I really need to build a more diverse coalition.
Find people who perhaps do not look like you and make sure that they are aware of this message and that they are communicating to us how this campaign can best speak to them.
And so it's something he's acknowledged as a candidate and something the campaign is serious about trying to remedy.
Buttigieg has proven himself to be a formidable fundraiser and a skilled campaigner. If he wins, he would be the youngest man to ever occupy the Oval Office. And even some of his critics aren't ruling him out.
I think he'll go the distance. I think he'll go the distance.
All right, my royal family. So, we're going to continue on with this. And folks been questioning Pete Buttigieg about many things. So this next video will give even a more insight about Pete Buttigieg. And from the first and the second video, got something real deep I'm going to tell you about, what y'all going to see here.
There are a lot of Democrats running for president in 2020, and they're all vying for the middle-class vote.
I plan to refer to as middle-class Joe.
Working families,
investing in all of America.
Working-class families.
The middle class of this country.
But how closely can these candidates actually relate to the struggles of average Americans? To begin to answer that question, let's look at how much money they have. 13 Democratic candidates have released their tax returns as of August 2019. At the top of the income list is former Vice President Joe Biden, who brought in a whopping $4.5 million in 2018. On the other end is South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg and his husband, Chasta, made a combined $152,643 last year. So, how does Buttigieg make his money? Buttigieg is the youngest candidate currently running for president. He became South Bend's mayor in 2012. Buttigieg entered the 2020 race with a lower national profile than many of the senators and governors he's facing, but he quickly entered the top tier of candidates while raising gobs of money. Buttigieg is now jockeying for a position with the likes of Biden and Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris. And up to this point, he's made a lot less money than his older rivals. The roughly $150,000 income last year came from Buttigieg's salary as mayor and his husband's job as a middle school teacher. In 2017, the year before Buttigieg got married, he made $133,565. That year, he got a $30,000 advance on his book, Shortest Way Home, which came out in February 2019. Between the start of 2018 and May 2019, Buttigieg took in $45,000 total from book advance and royalties payments. He earned another $3,000 for narrating an audiobook version. That pales in comparison to what 2020 contenders like Biden, Sanders, and Warren got for their books. Buttigieg's tax returns show he's only a few years removed from making way less than he is now. He took in about $150,000 in 2009, his last full year as a consultant at McKinsey. But his adjusted gross income fell to about $34,000 in 2010. Then it dropped again to only about $7,000 in 2011, the year he first ran for mayor of South Bend. He unsuccessfully ran for Indiana treasurer in 2010, before winning the mayoral election a year later. Buttigieg is hardly wanting for cash now. His household income of about $150,000 last year more than doubles the median U.S. household income of just above $60,000. He has between about $87,000 and $307,000 in assets, held up in investment funds and stocks in individual companies like Alphabet and Apple. The mayor does have a major liability, roughly $130,000 in student loans. Buttigieg's lack of wealth relative to his rivals could spare him from some of the criticism they are already facing on the campaign trail. The millions Biden made since he left the Obama administration have sparked skepticism of the middle-class Joe persona he promotes on the campaign trail. And Sanders, who runs as a champion of the working class, has faced questions about the millions he raked in from writing books.
You ready to have me plead guilty? I plead guilty to have written a book which was an international bestseller, okay? And when you write a book that makes it to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, you make money. And I made money.
Either way, Buttigieg may be making a lot more money from book royalties now, after his presidential campaign made him into a household name.
Okay. So, my royal family, as far as we can see, based on the first video that I presented, and we getting a glimpse of what type of mayor he is, Buttigieg is not doing nothing no different than what white America do when they decide to get in the political arena. So this is not new at all. This has nothing to do with being homophobic. We have seen this, his actions across America. So based on what little we have seen at this point, Pete Buttigieg identifies with being a white man, and he is taking full advantage of white supremacy. And that is what you're supposed to do in a war. It is what it is, my royal family. Okay, now to me, this was even much deeper. There was periods where in Buttigieg's life, his coins wasn't looking right. He got a student loan. Well, since he's been in that arena and he ain't accomplished anything, this system, the way it's set up, is going to make sure his paper game is right, because he has already demonstrated that he has no problem fucking over the royal family. It is what it is. So again, he's taking advantage of white supremacy. Okay, now I did read a lot of this video. Documents shield new lights on critical moment in Pete Buttigieg's South Bend political career. So let's go over here and listen to this video. 18 minutes, but very necessary.
TYT Investigates has a major story on the South Bend Police Department and how some in that department appeared to try to influence Pete Buttigieg in firing the black police chief. That's a very interesting story, and you're going to want to hear all the details, and some parts of it are deeply problematic. Anna Kasparian has more.
Democratic presidential candidate and South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg has been embroiled in a 7-year controversy involving allegations of racism within the city's police department. His decision to ask the town's first black police chief to step down didn't help. Soon after Buttigieg took office as South Bend mayor in 2012, he attempted to fire the town's first black police chief, Daryl Boykins. Boykins ultimately refused to step down and was later demoted. Now, TYT Investigates has seen previously unreported legal documents detailing secret recordings of South Bend police officers allegedly conspiring to work with Buttigieg's campaign donors to influence him to fire and replace Boykins. One officer is quoted as saying, "It is going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge." How do we know about the tapes? Former South Bend Director of Communications, Karen DePape, heard the recordings and described them in an internal police report back in 2012. Over the previous year, first while dealing with dysfunctional phone system equipment for the police department, DePape came across around a dozen recorded conversations that she said alarmed her. In a deposition later, DePape said she listened to the calls because, quote, "It was something I considered illegal." Buttigieg has refused to release the tapes, arguing that it would violate federal wiretap laws. And Buttigieg has said he does not know what's on the tapes and that he's not sure he can even ask. But these legal documents show that city attorneys acting on his behalf did ask, and the city does know. Because after DePape filed a wrongful termination suit, the city attorneys sent her a list of questions about the tapes, and she answered, describing in detail what she heard in these recordings. TYT Investigates has seen the documents revealing what she heard, and here's what they said. The documents reveal that in February of 2011, 2 white police officers were heard discussing a campaign to get rid of Boykins, with Buttigieg donors acting as go-betweens. In April, the officers say they believe Buttigieg is unaware of the plan, and they expect the little effing squirt, as one calls him, to win the mayoral nomination. After he does win, a 3rd officer in June reports hearing directly from Buttigieg that Boykins is done. Some of the officers involved from both the SBPD and the County Homicide Unit, made up of police from South Bend and its suburbs, were recorded discussing Boykins in racist terms, using Ebonics in reference to him and other Black people. 2 Black police officers are named as either a target for removal or the subject of racist rhetoric. DePape writes in one of the documents, quote, I believe that speaking in Ebonics and alluding that chief of police, because he is Black, was covering for Black gang members to be a racial slur. I believe this because they were talking in Ebonics, and it made me believe they wanted to get rid of Boykins because he was Black. No comments were made as to him not performing his duties, just that he protects gang members. According to the documents, one of the conversations was between Captain Brian Young and then Lieutenant Dave Wells of the County Homicide Unit. They were discussing problems with a local gang known as the Cash Out Boys when Lieutenant Wells started speaking in what is termed as Ebonics. Lieutenant Wells in Ebonics stated to the effect, ain't nothing gonna get done with the Cash Out Boys because Boykins, he take care of his homeboys. Both Wells and Young began to ridicule Boykins and mock him when Wells stated that Corbett had a plan to get rid of him. Commander Tim Corbett ran the County Homicide Unit. He was Wells's boss. He was also a controversial figure in South Bend and was commonly referred to as Teflon Tim. In 2011, Captain Young fills Wells in on a plan to get rid of Boykins. Here's how the documents describe that call. Young inquired what was the plan, and Wells stated it involved the money people. Young asked Wells, what do you mean by money people? Wells stated Hensley and Urbanski, people that are putting money in Buttigieg's campaign. Wells stated Corbett said they are planning to get rid of Boykins and that they had plans to make changes. Both Hensley and Urbanski deny this. Hensley is Sam Hensley, who happened to be the city's streets commissioner under the previous mayor. Bob Urbanski was a city contractor who Corbett had actually done a favor for back in 2006. Urbanski had an issue with a contractor, and Corbett showed up to the contractor's house with his badge and gun to allegedly intimidate the man. The plan didn't end up working, but Urbanski apparently ended up returning the favor to Corbett. According to TYT Investigates, the documents suggest the plan was well underway by April 5th, 2011, 1 month before the primary. Wells and Young discussed Corbett's plan to get rid of Boykins. Later, on April 5th, Young and Wells discussed new details of the plan, expanding its scope beyond just getting rid of Boykins. Now the two target other colleagues to whack. In the legal documents, Karen DePape writes, Lieutenant Wells and Captain Young continue conversations regarding the plan to get rid of Boykins. I believe this conversation also discussed getting rid of Will Johnson, a Black investigator, because Boykins put him there. I believe this conversation had to do with Wells and Young making a plan of who they wanted to whack. After Buttigieg had won the primary, the officers begin to discuss who Boykins' replacement should be. Investigative Division Police Chief Steve Richmond and current South Bend Police Chief Scott Ruskowski get mentioned in the tapes as early as June 3rd, 2011. In her deposition, DePape says, quote, Captain Young and Lieutenant Wells discuss their plans when Buttigieg is elected. They state Corbett advised Buttigieg that Boykins is effing worthless. Ruskowski was a captain at the time and apparently suggested that his own boss get the role of police chief. At the time, Buttigieg was apparently considering another officer for the job, and according to what DePape wrote in the documents, Ruskowski wanted to squash that. Young and Wells discussed Ruskowski meeting with Buttigieg to sway him away from Steve Richmond, trying to promote Jeff Walters. Several police calls were made to that effing crew, people with the money, Karen DePape wrote in the documents. Lieutenant Wells stated that several phone calls were made to that effing crew, people with money. The call contained information that Corbett was putting pressure on the people with the money to put influence on Buttigieg to remove Boykins. I believe this may have been the conversation where Wells stated, "Tim says it is going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge." According to the legal documents, by June 16th, Buttigieg and Ken Cotter, who's now the prosecutor, have a discussion about Steve Richmond. Then, on July 7th, Young and Jim Taylor, who was part of Corbett's homicide unit, talked to Buttigieg about replacing Boykins with Richmond as chief. Asked about conversations with Buttigieg about removing Boykins, Urbanski told TYT, quote, "I've got no knowledge on that." In response to a follow-up question, Urbanski said, "Have a nice day," and hung up. What we do know is that Boykins was eventually asked by Buttigieg to step down. At first, Boykins agreed to do so and later contested the request by Buttigieg. Boykins was eventually demoted. Buttigieg has changed his story as to why he wanted to fire Boykins. Buttigieg has said that his decision stems from Boykins' handling of the secret recordings, and he alleges that prosecutors warned Boykins could be prosecuted for illegal wiretapping. But the U.S. attorney declined to prosecute Boykins, and no one even said a crime occurred. Buttigieg also claimed that the feds threatened to charge Boykins unless he was let go from the department. But again, no one has said that Boykins committed a crime. Buttigieg later said that he couldn't have Boykins in the police department while he was facing an investigation. But again, Boykins was never charged with anything. In fact, Boykins was asked by prosecutors to hold onto the tapes, which is strange if he were really the subject of a wiretapping investigation. So let's go back to Buttigieg's campaign donors. Exactly how much did Hensley and Urbanski, the so-called people with money, donate to Buttigieg's campaign? Buttigieg's first mayoral campaign disclosures were actually destroyed, and that's legal to do in this local election. But before they were, the South Bend Tribune reported that Urbanski chaired his 2011 campaign and was his biggest donor. Urbanski gave Buttigieg $10,000 in 2010. The report also says Urbanski donated office space to the campaign. According to 2011 first quarter filings obtained by TYT, the office space was worth $1,850 a month and was donated by Urbanski's company, Main Street Row. The value of that donation totaled $7,400 for the first 4 months of 2011. TYT Investigates had to do more digging with Hensley. According to the story, Hensley described himself as a modest donor, giving maybe $100 or $200. The 2011 first quarter filings show just a $50 donation from Hensley and an in-kind donation valued at $44.30 connected to an event on March 25th. But what about other forms of campaign contributions? According to TYT Investigates, asked whether the in-kind donation indicated his participation in a fundraiser for Buttigieg, Hensley said he, quote, never had a fundraiser for him, never. A flyer from the campaign, however, shows Hensley and Urbanski co-hosting a $125 per person fundraiser for Buttigieg at Urbanski's home on April 13th. Both donors deny having police department personnel discussions with Buttigieg. Buttigieg's campaign national press secretary, Chris Mager, asked to see the documents that TYT Investigates has seen, arguing that, quote, you're more than willing to report rumors you are unable to prove, so it'd be nice to see some of this. He provided no further comment to TYT Investigates.
All right, well, now you've seen some of what we have, and it's up on tyt.com, and you can all read it for yourselves. Look, let's give a little perspective and context now. So, are any of these reports or documents charging that Buttigieg knew of the entire plan and was complicit in it? No, not as far as we can tell. Now, there is that part about where one of the officers claimed that they heard it from Buttigieg himself that Boykins was done. But even that doesn't indicate that he was part of the plan in the first place. And they call him, the officers apparently call him a little squirt in this regard. And they seem to want to influence him, not directly, but through his money people, Urbanski and the others. So on the other hand, to me, what is most interesting is not necessarily even about Buttigieg, but about how our system works in this country. The two parts are, one, how you influence the money people in order to get the results. And in this case, the results are clear. No matter who knew what part of the plan, unfortunately, the black police chief was originally fired, then demoted. When the African-American community said, wait, why are you firing this police chief who hasn't done anything wrong? And so, but it's not just that. There were 3 officers, black officers, that were mentioned in the tapes. None of them ever got promotions in the time since the tapes, and only one of them remains on the force today. Even worse, when Buttigieg started, there was 29 black cops in South Bend. Now there's only 15. Now, it could be a coincidence that, hey, you know, they moved out of town, there was really things that were wrong with them. You could go on and on, but that is not a good record. And now 26% of South Bend is African-American. The police force now is down to 6% African-American. And so whether Buttigieg knew any of the machinations of his money people, and whether the cops were right about his money people, the results seem to be that black officers were moved out of the South Bend Police Department exactly as the police seemed to be, the white officers seem to have plotted, according to the documents. So that is damning. And then, so that's the role of money. And that's all across the country in huge presidential and national elections, and also in small elections in your neck of the woods. Now, the second part that's damning about America overall is, my God, how racism is so deeply rooted. So, according to the documents, the person who listened to the tapes wrote down that Corbett also called black gang members little apes. And then there's the line, of course, of it's going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge. And as it turned out, white people were back in charge. And so to see them talking in a way that is mocking of their police chief, even though he's their chief, but he's black, and how they pretend that he's on the side of the gang members, again, with no evidence at all as far as we can tell from these documents, just, well, he's black and they're black. And how they plot against them. In this case, these allegations are not innuendo, not stereotypes, not something in the back of your head. No, this is something very much in the front of their heads, and it's a plot that they seem to have, according to the documents, enacted. And if all of it is correct, certainly successfully so. And so not only do African Americans in this country have to deal with this if they're regular citizens, they also have to deal with it if they're officials. And some of the things that they deal with are stereotypes, and others are active plots against them. So, my God, if you didn't know before, well, certainly this gives you a little view into what happens all across. You think this is just South Bend? Of course this isn't just South Bend. Some variations of this, unfortunately, probably happen all across the country. South Bend is the one we happen to know about because Pete Buttigieg ran for president. So a little investigation into this produced all of these results. And so what could you find in your hometown if we had real reporters looking into all the different parts of the government?
Not good.
Yeah. So look, in terms of what Buttigieg knew and when he knew it, that should be the focus of a lot of reporters' attentions if they cared to cover his campaign thoroughly. And those are very fair questions. For him to throw his hands up and go, I don't know, the black police chief just happened to get fired and demoted, and half the black police officers are no longer on the job. It's all a coincidence and has nothing to do with me. Okay, that's a case he could make, but certainly one that he'd have to explain a little bit better. And right now, what we have is a lot of questions, and the results are not good.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and...
So, my royal family, the reason why I wanted to show that particular video, it shows that Pete Buttigieg is willing to protect white supremacy, willing to protect the political system. So what he is doing is nothing new from many other past politicians. Like I said, that arena is crazy. And then when you start going up the food chain and people are fighting like hard, they jockeying for power, they're going to start exposing you. And again, this has nothing to do with being homophobic. I'm not surprised by his actions. I would question it if he didn't do anything. I'd be wondering what his agenda is. His agenda is very clear. But this is what pisses us off. Buttigieg says being gay allows him to relate to black voters. Well, let's hear what Buttigieg have to say.
Hey, Real Fam, it's your girl Natasha. We're here in Washington, D.C., getting ready to talk to Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Don't act up right
Mayor
now.
Pete just released a huge plan called the Douglas Plan, which is dedicated to issues impacting the black community. So we're going to talk to him about what he has planned, why he says this is a game changer, and why he thinks he's the best candidate for president. This is Woke Vote 2020. So I just want to jump in and talk about the Douglas Plan. This week during the debate, you made this major announcement that focused on issues impacting the African American community. And a lot of people were really excited about your focus on these issues. Why was it important for you to create a plan like this?
Well, it means that we've got to recognize that there are specific reasons why we have different health outcomes. And it's not just because of income. It is specific to race. We see it in the way that black women's reports of pain are not taken as seriously in a clinical environment. We see it simply in the fact that black professionals are underrepresented among physicians and nurses. All of this needs direct and specific attention and resources. So we're proposing that we fund health equity zones. The point here is that this is different in different communities. We want the community to come up with the game plan to have an anti-racist thrust in the way they come at health, and then put federal dollars into actually making it a reality. Some areas you got issues with detection of diabetes for men. Some areas you've got environmental hazards because redlining has pushed black families into neighborhoods where sometimes the houses are making them sick. You know, we hear a lot about lead poisoning in water, much less about the big issue in many communities, including mine, for lead, which is lead poisoning in the houses. It's coming from the paint. And we need a plan for that because that is often racially disparate. We have to attack this with every tool in the toolkit if we want to get somewhere.
Every election season, there's talk about these issues, right? We've heard about redlining, economic exclusion. So what makes it different this time, and do you really think we can see progress on these fronts?
I think we're going to have to. I've reached the conclusion that if we don't tackle systemic racism in my lifetime, then it is going to bring down the entire American project in our lifetime. Because what we've seen, especially under this administration, is a lot of racial issues that we thought, or I'll be honest, a lot of racial issues that a lot of white liberals thought were maybe in the past, not so much. And these things have never really left us. Now they're being brought into the open in terms of the language and the abusive behavior from the White House on down. But beneath it is a much deeper complex of economic exclusion and exclusion from voting and criminal justice. This is wrecking the entire chance at America being what we can be. And so everybody has a stake in doing something about it. And if nothing else, I think there's a different level of urgency for all of America to make sure that some of America is not living effectively in a different country.
So one thing that stood out about you, and this is more of a personal observation, but it's this idea that you are empathetic, particularly when it comes to race. When it comes to racism, one of the things that is important is the idea of being able to see other people's experiences, to walk in their shoes. Where did that empathy come from? And did you have relationships with Black people that influenced the way that you understood racism?
Yes, to some extent, although I don't want to be the white guy telling you that I understand the Black experience because I have Black friends. I think for me it was not only sometimes understanding race and losing my racial innocence through conversations with people in my life who were Black, but also experiences in my life that maybe on their face had nothing to do with race. You know, belonging to a group that has been hated, feared, and denied opportunity in a very different way. I think has helped me understand as a gay American, not what it's like to be Black, but why we all need to stand up for each other when anybody is being excluded. This is a time when men need to be standing up for women, and white people need to be standing up for people of color, and straight people need to be defending queer people. We all have something to lose if any pattern of exclusion survives in this time we're in, where Americans are being pitted against each other.
Was there a personal experience in which maybe you saw your own white privilege at work or an awareness, or is that something you just always had?
The thing about being white is you don't have to think about being white very much. It's only when you're challenged or when you begin to see things through somebody else's eyes. I remember when I first moved to Washington, I was here for a few months right out of college. And I lived in a largely Black neighborhood, and I remember just being on a bus and being the only white guy on the bus and looking around and thinking, that's really striking. And then thinking, gosh, in all the rooms I've been in, you know, classrooms and business meetings with one person of color in there, I guess that must really get, I might not even notice it one way or the other, but they sure would. And now I just began to realize in a different way how you are reminded of your race whenever you're in a minority. And you're not reminded of your race very much when you're in a majority. And so, you know, part of what we got to get over, part of what I've got to talk to, I think, a lot of white voters about, is the fact that race is something that shapes all of our lives, but only some of us have to consciously deal with it and think about it all the time.
So I wanted to talk about an issue that is going to affect us all regardless of race, but particularly when it comes to Black and brown communities, it's going to disproportionately affect us, and that's climate change. We're on fire right now when it comes to figuring out how to address this issues, but particularly poor communities are not necessarily prepared to address some of the natural disasters that are going to come their way. How would you work to actively support those communities and get them ready to address the issue of climate change?
You know, I remember having a 1,000-year flood in South Bend while I was mayor. This has actually happened more than once, which is one indication that climate change is coming fast. And I remember going to visit a neighborhood that had been impacted, and I was standing on the porch. It was on the west side of South Bend, low income, mostly Black neighborhood. It's the day before the first day of school. Mom's got 4 kids, and her possessions are floating by on the lower level of their house, and she's saying, what am I supposed to do? And it changed everything about how I see climate change. Because I think on TV, when we hear climate change, we think that footage of the Arctic, right? We see hunks of ice falling off of glaciers. And now I realize what climate change looks like is Americans, often Americans of color, trying to pick up the pieces when we have more and more frequent and more severe disasters. Mm-hmm. And that's only going to increase. Katrina was another place where we saw how every time there's a natural disaster, it seems to hurt the most vulnerable first. So this is an issue of environmental and racial justice, as well as an issue of generational justice, because the longer somebody's planning to be here, I'm thinking about kids and I'm thinking about the future, but also younger adults, the more you have to lose. It's why my disaster preparedness plan is going to call for resilience funding for communities to be more resilient, to get aid where it needs to go more quickly, and to improve the way that we do insurance for catastrophic events in this country. Otherwise, we are going to see those who have the most to lose out even more when climate change accelerates.
So before we wrap, I want to address a couple of myths or critiques depending on how you look at them, and you tell me what you think about them. Despite the racial diversity of the candidates, ethnic diversity, we have all types of diversity. There are a lot of people who think that only Joe Biden is in a position to beat Donald Trump in 2020. So what do you think about that?
Well, let me say this. Let's look at recent history. I'm talking like the last 50 years. Every time Democrats have won, it's been somebody from a new generation with a different story who's not been in Washington very long. I mean, back from Obama through Clinton, all the way back to Jimmy Carter, and even JFK in a way. Every time we've gone with the most established, most familiar, most Washington experienced candidate, again, I'm saying for the last 50 years, every time we've done that, we've come up short. People are looking for something different right now, and people are looking for a message that is more than just back to normal. I definitely get the part that creates that craving for normalcy, because what's going on now, we can't live with 4 more years of this chaos, this exhaustion. But part of how we got here is that normal is not working. Normal is not working in the Rust Belt, where I live, in the industrial Midwest. Normal has not been working for a lot of black and brown folks in this country. We're going to have to say more than just, you know, we're going to rewind the clock a little bit. This president's trying to take us back to the 50s. If the Democratic Party is just trying to take us back to the 90s, I don't think that's a good message, and I'm not sure we win with that.
Another thing that's on your website, more experience in government than the current president, more experience in government than the current president, more executive experience than the VP, and yet some people say, but you've only been a mayor. How does that mean that you're ready to be president?
Well, it's a leap from any job to the presidency, let's admit that. But I would say right now, being a mayor of a city of any size means that you understand the different responsibilities that come with leading not just an office, but a population. You get the 3 a.m. phone call about dealing with emergencies, in addition to setting policies, in addition to having to summon people to their highest values, which is the unwritten part of an executive job, and the most important of all, and the one we're missing in the White House right now. You know, you could be I probably wouldn't be getting that question if I was a senator, but the funny thing is, you could be a very senior senator in this country, and depending what you did before, maybe have never in your life been responsible for more than 100 people. It's different when you're a mayor. You are on the ground working to get things done. In between that and my military experience, I'll acknowledge my experience is different than some of my competitors, but I think it's no less strong and no less good of a preparation for the White House.
So while we're in the room, there's often a community that often feels not represented in conversations, and those are communities in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, which we know have suffered from hurricanes and displacement and what some people are calling disaster capitalism. What would you do to help Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands to make sure that they're taken care of?
Well, to me, this is not just a question of improving how we respond to disasters. We definitely have to do that. This is about political empowerment, and it's why we need to make sure that U.S. citizens have adequate representation. I don't think the response to Maria would have been so weak if Puerto Rico had presidential electoral votes. And while it's up to the people of Puerto Rico to decide on statehood, I think that right now we should have presidential electoral votes there. And by the way, this is also true for U.S. citizens in D.C. District of Columbia has no representation in the House or the Senate, and no voting representation. And there's no principled argument why that should be the case. And I wonder whether it's a coincidence that if D.C. were a state, it would be the most African American state in the Union.
So there was this moment in the debate where you actually acknowledged that maybe you made some mistakes in the handling of police dissatisfaction in the Black community. A lot of people were really impressed by that, this idea that a politician would acknowledge that maybe I didn't make the mark. What made you take that route? And did you have any fear about doing that?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure, especially when you're on a presidential debate stage, to deny anything that's ever gone wrong, defend everything, and just wave away any kind of criticisms. But I think one of the problems we have right now in this country is a reality deficit, right? We got a president who's completely divorced from reality. And I think it feels that Washington in general is not accountable to the hard facts of life. When you're a mayor, you can't get away from it. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done. It's a good city that has come back from the brink, and we've done incredible things together. But when something comes up short, I gotta own up to that, because I'm in charge. And part of being in charge is saying, okay, so in this particular issue had to do with the diversity on our police department. We've really struggled, especially in the post-Ferguson years, to attract more black officers. We've tried, it's important to us, and we've come up short. I want people to know that, because we want help getting that right. And I want people to know that when something is going poorly, I have the ability to face that, own it, and work on how to make it better.
A message to queer youth of color, particularly trans youth of color, who they in particular are feeling exclusion, particularly young trans youth of color who are dying or being killed in disproportionate numbers. What would you say to them?
What I want queer youth of color to know is that you're not alone, and that it does get better, that there are people who will stand at your side, and you will feel sometimes so alone. Sometimes in the very places you look to for support, tragically. Sometimes your church or your family, where you're looking for unconditional love, is not prepared to see you for who you are. That's not your fault. It's something they've got to deal with. But that doesn't make you any less of a person, and that doesn't mean you have any less to give. Think about how much you are needed. Think about somebody else whose life might be better if they get to know you one day. And hold on tight. I know it's not easy, but it's going to get better.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, my royal family. So, based on, let me go a little bit. Based on Pete Buttigieg interview, he sounds no different from any other politician I've heard throughout my life. But he is being also, because I touched upon it, questioned by who's donating to him. And since he is attached to the gay community, and the gay community, like any other community, has an agenda. And they're going to invest in their agenda. They ain't just giving them money to give them money. They want some things moved around. They want some laws passed. You know, even though, and I said that wrong. The white gay community is a protective class. And that is it, and that is all. But Pete Buttigieg, again, you're no different. You're going to continue to be exposed. He will not become the president, but don't be surprised he become the governor of his state, because he is demonstrating that he is not willing to break the system up. So it goes back to, do he identify himself as gay, or do he identify himself as white, male, privilege? And he took full advantage of it. So what's new? What's homophobic about that? That's the question that I ask. I'm going to continue to watch him close, because based on some of my research, people are starting to question things much heavily. And when you get on that world stage like that, you will be exposed. So, my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.